Molly always loved children, which is why she deliberately chose a career in education. After graduating from university, she found a job teaching language and literature at a school. Her students loved her because she always tried to present the material in a way that would interest her class, and she was very successful at it. By the age of 25, she had already become one of the best teachers in the city, and she was very proud of it. However, her personal life was not going well. None of her suitors attracted Molly, and she didn't see any good prospects for herself. But one day, at a local literary meeting, she met a wonderful and sensitive young man named Edward. Their acquaintance gradually developed, and Molly fell in love with her Edward. He was so attentive, elevated, and romantic. In a word, he was a prince from a fairy tale. He even wrote poetry for Molly and proposed in the best tradition of knights. He sang a serenade under her window, kneeling on one knee. Of course, Molly couldn't refuse, nor did she want to. They got married, but during the preparation for the wedding, an unpleasant situation arose. Edward didn't have a job at the moment. He was working on writing his own collection of poems, which he planned to sell to a publishing house later. "Well, then we'll have to cut back on the wedding ceremony," Molly sighed. "No, what are you talking about?" Edward's eyes filled with fear. "How can we do that?" "There can only be one wedding, and it must be beautiful. You know that as soon as I finish my book, it will be snatched up by any publishing house, and we will be sitting on sacks of money. But there's not much left, so we don't have to worry about money, and we shouldn't skimp on the wedding. Let's take out a loan." "A loan?" Molly hesitated. On the one hand, of course, she wanted the wedding day to be special and memorable, but on the other hand, going into debt was not to her liking. "What's wrong with loans? Everyone lives like this now." Edward shrugged. "We'll pay it back in no time. We'll have to make a couple of payments, and I'll compensate for the rest." "Well, if you're so sure about it," the girl sighed, agreeing with the groom's plan. "Of course I'm certain." The young man smiled and ran his hand over the bride's cheek. "You're such a beauty that I'll do anything for you." Molly was delighted, but she didn't think then that Edward was willing to do anything for her, but only at the expense of a loan in her name. After all, he didn't work, and no one would give him any money. So everything was decided. They had a lavish wedding and went into debt. Molly's relatives, of course, didn't support such an initiative and tried to dissuade her, but she already had a plan for the perfect wedding in her head. To all reasonable arguments, she insisted on one thing. "This is my wedding. Can't I afford to be luxurious once in my life?" No one could object, so the ceremony went as the bride and groom wanted. They were about to go on a honeymoon to the sea, but then the bank refused to give them a loan. So, instead of Greece, they had to go to Egypt. The tickets were purchased by relatives. Edward was unhappy that they couldn't visit Greece and grumbled throughout the entire vacation. Molly, on the other hand, tried to relax as much as possible. She understood that their newly formed family would only be held together by her fragile female shoulders for now, but reassured herself with the thought that it wouldn't be for long. When they returned home, Molly immediately went back to work. Edward moved in with his wife, as he had lived with his mother before and did not have his own place. "Well, this is all temporary. We'll have a really big house for sure," Molly thought. And it wouldn't have been so bad if the bank didn't require regular payments. Her husband didn't demand delicious food and a clean house, and Molly didn't try to keep up with everything. Finally, it became clear that she couldn't handle everything alone. "Listen, when are you going to finish your book?" Molly asked, somewhat irritably. Edward tore himself away from his laptop, where he was watching a series, and gazed at his wife with undisguised irritation. With one hand she stirred the soup in the pot, while with the other she flipped the cutlets. "It's art, Molly. It takes time. I don't have the inspiration to write, and I just can't do it at the click of a button," the guy replied. "So maybe you should get a job then," Molly suggested. Edward was so shocked that he was silent for almost a minute and simply blinked his long eyelashes. "What am I supposed to do? Should I, a poet, be a longshoreman?" "Oh no, why a longshoreman?" Molly covered the pot with a lid and turned to her husband. "For example, we have an opening for a teacher of fine arts." "I don't have a pedagogical education to work with children," grumbled Edward. "And besides, I don't recognize any art except poetry. And this children's scribble will only bring out more of it." "We have a private school. I think I can arrange for you to be accepted without a pedagogical education, at least for a couple of hours," continued the woman, ignoring his excuses. "You are, it seems, an art historian by education. I think this will be suitable for working as a teacher." "Do you even hear me?" the man exploded. "I don't want to look at these scribbles that your students can squeeze out of themselves, let alone evaluate them. I'm a poet, not an artist, and even if I were an artist, I simply couldn't stand the drawings of schoolchildren." "Everyone has to start somewhere," Molly calmly replied. "Children draw poorly, but you will be able to work and help me pay off the loan." "Oh, I see," Edward sneered. "You need money. Of course, everyone needs money. You don't appreciate love, care and tenderness." "You know what, Edward?" Molly exclaimed, throwing the spoon into the sink. "And where do you love and care for me? You could help me do something around the house for once. I work at school, clean at home, cook lunch, go to the store, and you just pretend to be busy." "I work!" Edward turned crimson. "Where is the result?" Molly crossed her arms over her chest and added with challenge. "If you're a poet, show me your latest poem." Edward fell silent and stared at his hands. Molly even felt sorry for him. After all, he was a creative, sensitive person. She knew who she married, so why shout now? "I understand you, Molly," Edward said when she was already about to apologize. "Okay, ask about the vacancy. I'll start working at your school, just so that you don't feel so overwhelmed." It required great effort for Molly to remain silent and nod. The woman turned away from her husband, returning to the preparation of dinner. The next day, she found a free minute and went to the school principal's office to talk about Edward. Molly spent half an hour describing what a wonderful husband she had, how much he loved children, what a brilliant art historian he was. It didn't matter that he wrote poetry. He understood all the arts perfectly and would do great with the job. "I understand," replied the school director with a smile. "Children really need a good teacher. Of course, with education it would be even better. But our previous employee left 6 months ago. There was no one to teach drawing to the kids. Well, let's take a closer look at your husband. For now, we'll put him on a trial period of 2 weeks, and then we'll make it official." "Oh, thank you so much," beamed Molly. "Well, it's not a big deal. Can he start tomorrow?" "Of course he can," nodded Molly. "Great. Then we'll wait for him. By the way, Molly, you have such a talent for teaching. Would you like to work as a tutor on the side? Many parents of our students ask for private lessons for their children, and they want you specifically. Of course, payment is separate." "Oh, this is so unexpected and very, very pleasant," smiled Molly. "I'm happy to do it." "Wonderful. Then I'll give out your contacts. It's very pleasant to talk and work with you," praised Tatiana. "Thank you," said Molly. "I'm glad to work in your school." Molly went home happy. Now Edward could earn money, and she could breathe freely. Edward took the news of his job with the philosophical wisdom and humility of a monk. Okay, the man briefly stated his position, listening to his wife's emotional story. I'll go watch one more episode. For Molly, such behaviour was incomprehensible and offensive. She was trying for their family. She got an additional part-time job and helped him get a job at her school, instead of unloading wagons, but he was still dissatisfied. Well, okay, maybe he is just upset and the lack of money is affecting him. Of course, it is just a difficult period, Molly decided. Edward began to go to work, showing his unwillingness to be there. Molly had to kick him out of bed in the morning, scold him, shout throughout the apartment, just so her husband would wake up and begrudgingly start getting ready. Molly thought it couldn't go on like this for long, but then suddenly Edward even enjoyed working. He started waking up without shouting in the mornings and stopped being late. Soon the director decided to keep him at work. Molly's joy knew no bounds. Edward seemed to have started working on his book again. At least he was typing something on his laptop and making notes in his notebook. Molly didn't ask any questions to avoid distracting her husband, nor did she have time. The director wasn't joking when she said that many wanted to see Molly as a tutor. 15 people expressed a desire to study with her additionally. Molly somehow managed to schedule them for every workday. Of course, there was only one session per week for each child, but it was better than nothing, as parents said. But she really wasn't expecting so many people who wanted to have additional lessons. Refusing was somehow inconvenient, so Molly spun like a hamster in a wheel. In the morning, she finished checking homework, then ran to school, held lessons, ate, rushing, and then ran to people's homes. Molly had no fewer than 2 tutoring sessions per day. On Saturday, on her day off, she cleaned the house, bought groceries, and tried to cook as much as possible. Sunday, the woman usually spent like in a fog. She checked the pupils' homework, made a syllabus, and then went to bed without energy. Molly lost interest in everything that used to be interesting to her. She did not get any pleasure from life. Because of her irregular and unhealthy diet, she began to have problems with her skin and weight. Because of lack of sleep and fatigue, her hair began to fall out, her nails became brittle, huge bags formed under her eyes, and she began to experience pain all over her body that could not be relieved by any painkillers. Later, she also developed kidney problems. In general, she was in a bad state. After a year of living like this, Molly was unrecognizable to her old acquaintances. She looked like a ghost. However, she was unable to change anything because she was still paying off her credit. Her husband Edward never learned to earn a decent income, so she had to work hard. One day during her day off on a Sunday, Edward approached her while she was lying down and staring at the ceiling. "Molly, we need to talk," he said with a tragic sigh. "What's wrong?" Molly asked indifferently. "You know, things have definitely changed lately," Edward began. "You can't be recognized at all. You stopped enjoying life, immersed yourself in your work, you don't notice anything that's happening around. And, by the way, the most important things are happening around. You didn't even notice that I'm often not at home. Or do you not care? In any case, I can't live like this anymore. I didn't marry such a girl, so I'm filing for divorce." Molly smiled, or snorted. "Go ahead." "Aren't you even going to fight for our relationship?" asked Edward in shock. "There's nothing to fight for," Molly said, turning away, indicating the conversation was over. She didn't care that her beloved husband was leaving her forever. She knew he had a mistress. More than one person at work had hinted to her that the physical training teacher had often been seen in Edward's company. Once, Molly opened her husband's notebook filled with love poems. All the poems were dedicated to a certain Melanie, who coincidentally worked as a physical training teacher for girls. That's when Molly realized why her husband suddenly became more active at school. However, by that time, she was so tired of such a life that she simply didn't want to arrange a showdown. Molly divorced Edward. Her relatives helped her completely pay off the loan and then called her for a family council. At this council, it was decided that Molly would either leave her job at school or her tutoring work because things could not continue like this. Molly agreed. First of all, she felt indifferent to everything, and secondly, she felt that she was exhausted, so it would be very convenient to finish tutoring or at least refuse several children who did not need classes. Finally, Molly had a little spare time in her life. Once, while cleaning the house, she stood frozen in front of the mirror. She was horrified to see her reflection. She was only 27, but looked 40. Extra weight, bags under her eyes, thin hair, brittle nails. Molly was in shock. It was clear why her husband switched to another girl. Right away, Molly decided to sign up for the gym and beauty salon, and also to the music school to make it less boring. She had some free time and money, so she could afford it. After a year of hard work on herself, Molly saw some results. The extra weight had gone, her skin had become clearer, her hair a bit thicker, and she was getting better with music, but she still constantly felt tired, irritated and dissatisfied. Nevertheless, this did not prevent her from meeting Michael. This time, her boyfriend was hard-working and even helped her around the house. Molly was happy when he proposed to her. Now she did not have to take out a loan, as Michael decided to pay for the wedding himself. A year later, Molly became pregnant and went on maternity leave. Michael was happy and took care of his wife, while Molly adored her husband and already loved their future child. However, she did not pass all the tests in life. The pregnancy was difficult. Molly had to be hospitalized 3 times. The doctor who was monitoring her pregnancy did not understand what was happening. All her tests had insignificant deviations from the norm. Her medical history was collected comprehensively. But what could go wrong? Tell me, have you ever experienced a lack of energy, irritability? Maybe your hair fell out, or you had problems with your skin or internal organs? The consulting gynecologist asked Molly doubtfully after another hospitalization. Yes, I have experienced that, the girl admitted, but at that time I worked a lot and my relationship with my ex-husband was worse than you can imagine, so I think it was all due to stress. Possible, but let's better visit a geneticist, suggested the doctor. Anything can happen and we don't need unnecessary risks. With the baby, everything is fine according to the ultrasound, but don't panic yet. I may be wrong. You just have an atypical course of pregnancy. Obstetrics and gynecology, is a strange subject. Not always everything is as in textbooks. Yes, I understand. Yes, I will try not to get nervous again, agreed Molly. The woman was given a referral to a doctor, whom she visited a couple of days later. Molly had to go through some unpleasant procedures, including taking the baby's blood through the umbilical cord. Finally, the results were ready. Molly came to the geneticist's consultation accompanied by her husband. Well, let's start with the good news, said the geneticist, looking at Molly's chart. These words immediately destroyed the woman's weak hope that everything was still fine with her. Your baby is healthy. Thank God, exclaimed Molly, and Michael squeezed her hand. And the bad news? Asked the man. The bad news is that you, Molly, have a rare genetic disease called Fabry disease. It is a progressive disease, so you will have to be treated intensively. But it is not certain that you will be able to overcome all the symptoms," said the doctor. Molly sat quietly, trying not to cry. But why did all this happen to her? What did she do in her life to deserve such punishment? "I understand that the situation seems terrible," sighed the doctor, "but with modern treatment methods, it will be possible to slow down the process, and you will live a long life. You will receive constant enzyme replacement therapy and almost completely remove the symptoms of the disease. All your pain, problems with your kidneys, these are all symptoms of this disease. But, as I have already noted, fortunately your daughter is healthy. She did not inherit the bad gene, but I advise you not to risk having more children." After leaving the clinic, Molly allowed herself to cry really hard. She had always wanted a big family, but now she was lucky that her only daughter would not suffer from any genetic disease. However, Molly herself would have to undergo therapy all her life. Michael tried to support his wife, but Molly fell into depression. Even the birth of a healthy child did not alleviate her condition much, as she immediately had to start treatment, and they had to buy expensive, artificial formulas for their daughter, which did not please either parent. When their daughter Amy turned 1, Michael couldn't take it anymore. "Molly, I'm sorry, but I can't tolerate this anymore. I keep thinking that Amy might have some abnormalities. I just can't go through that. Forgive me." "Michael, no, please, not you." Tears appeared in Molly's eyes. "Forgive me," repeated Michael, covering his face with his hands. "Forgive me, but I don't want a family with defects." Molly didn't understand how she went through the divorce. If it weren't for her mother, who moved in with her daughter to help her with the child, Molly would not have coped. The woman lay and cried for days on end, and her mother had to take care of both Amy and Molly. Life was not just a difficult period, but literally the whole world turned into a huge black hole that sucked out the remnants of Molly's strength every second. And then Amy started having allergies, and they had to switch to more expensive baby food, which Molly's family simply could not afford. Molly had to return to work, but everything slipped out of her hands. Her beloved students did not recognize their teacher, and the director called Molly to the serious talk. "Molly, what's happening to you?" the director asked directly. "I'm just exhausted," Molly admitted. "If you're tired and can't handle the work, maybe it's time to consider a change of profession." "What are you talking about?" Molly couldn't believe her ears. The director sighed. "There are complaints about you. If they continue, I will have to fire you. I can't believe I'm saying these words to you, but try to pull yourself together, please. I understand that you're going through a difficult time, but educating children should not suffer. Please understand me." "I understand," Molly sighed. When she left the director's office, tears rolled down her cheeks. That same evening, Molly went to her mother's house. She wanted to be in an environment that did not remind her of her own life. Molly remembered her childhood. It seemed that just yesterday she was running through those rooms and playing hide-and-seek with her mother, and now her mother was sitting with her daughter and waiting for Molly's return. And now she had an incurable disease, and again has to go through a course of IVs with medicine. The woman bit her lip to keep from crying and went to the old piano, which was something of a family heirloom. Molly's soul was tormented by the pain, which she poured out on the keys, playing her own melody. After finishing playing, she sat at the piano for a couple of minutes, reconciling herself to her fate. There was nothing she could do. She had to get treatment and return to this nightmare where there was no money, no love, no hope. Although, why no love? Molly shook herself. Amy, her daughter, gave her strength and made her mother live for her. And if it weren't for her, Molly's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. The girl flinched with surprise, but went to open the door. "Who's there?" asked Molly from behind the door. "Excuse me, I'm your new neighbour. I recently bought a flat here," a man's voice said. "I heard the piano and wanted to know what that melody was." Molly opened the door holding the chain. The man at the door did not seem dangerous. He was mature, but looked like he was in his 30s. There was a light grey in his hair, but it made him look younger than he was. "Sorry to bother you," said Molly. "Bother me? No, not at all." The man smiled. "I would love to hear more, but I can't recognise the composer." "You liked it?" Molly was surprised. "Madly," the man smiled. "So, who's the composer?" "Well, me," shrugged Molly uncertainly. "Wow." The man's eyes widened. "You have real talent. You know, I'm a music producer. I hear so many musicians every day, but somehow nothing really touches me. But this is something. I can't even find the words. Could you please play something else? If you feel shy to play in front of me, I can listen from my flat." Molly smiled and stepped back into her flat without any fear. "Please, come in." After listening to Molly's pieces, James, the producer, for several days in a row, persuaded Molly to sign a contract with him and record her works. Finally, Molly decided she had nothing to lose. James now took Molly seriously, and after 2 years, she transformed. She was now a well-known performer and composer, and her music was used in theatres, operas and musicals. Actually, there was no need for Molly to teach anymore. She had a stable, high income from various agencies and contracts. As for James, he fell in love with her, and Molly decided on her 3rd marriage, which turned out to be truly happy for her. James loved Amy as his own daughter, and as Amy didn't know her biological father, she quickly began calling James Dad, which made the producer pleased. Since then, Molly lived happily and practically stopped feeling uncomfortable with taking pills and receiving infusions. The symptoms of the disease no longer bothered her. Once, during one of her concerts, Molly noticed Edward among the audience. He looked at Molly with admiration, but she didn't care. She played her symphony, bowed to the audience, and under the thunderous applause went backstage, where her husband and daughter were waiting for her. "Brilliant as always," James smiled and kissed his wife. "Molly, an admirer came to see you and introduced himself as your ex-husband," one of the guards said. "Wow," Molly smiled. "Well, let him come." "Oh, Molly, lovely Molly." Edward showered her with compliments. "Although I didn't acknowledge any art, but poetry, you were simply magnificent. I am impressed and amazed to the core." "Thank you," Molly coldly smiled. "Did you want to talk about something? I don't have much time." "Oh, I understand," the man smiled. "It's dizzying fame, mountains of money, crowds of fans. Well, it doesn't matter. I'll be brief." He cleared his throat and got on one knee. "Dear Molly, agree to be with me only." "Oh, stop, Molly interrupted. "That's how your ballad began, followed by a marriage proposal. I've heard this before. It seems we got divorced." "Yes, so what?" Edward shrugged. "It's never too late to start from scratch. You let yourself go at that time and I had to leave. I can't be with something ugly. But you are beautiful now. I always knew you were beautiful. It was just a difficult period, and you left me," she harshly interrupted him. "You left something ugly in a difficult period. A very chivalrous act." "Molly, you have to understand me. And I forgave you," Edward said. Molly raised her eyebrows, then burst out laughing. "You forgave me? Oh, I can't listen to this anymore. Okay, Edward, get up and don't play the fool. Go to your angelic physical education teacher and don't bother me any more." "But Molly, I love only you." He grabbed her dress. "Besides, she's not my type at all." "Did she refuse to support you?" Molly smiled. "I'm a poet," exclaimed an offended Edward. "I can't work hard in factories. I was born to create, to write. I need inspiration every day." "You know, you're lying about everything. I'm an artist now too, and I have inspiration every day. It's my beloved husband and my beloved daughter, and a person like you need only to be supported and allowed to do nothing. I would never have married you if I had better understood your nature. Let's end it here. All the best to you." "Molly!" Edward exclaimed, trying to run after her, but James blocked his way. "Okay, enough of this circus. Get out of here, or else I'll call the police and send your gentle poet's soul to jail for harassment. Imagine the clientele of that place." Edward quickly gave up, trying to get Molly's attention, and left the backstage as quickly as he appeared. "You had terrible taste," James grinned. "Well, I'm glad I've improved it." Molly smiled and kissed her husband.